Having seen the role that layout plays in the big picture of visual note-taking, let's now dig into some specific ways to separate and connect ideas on the page. I would argue that the primary purpose of layout is to demonstrate how multiple ideas are related to each other. You can use layout to separate ideas, and you can also use layout to connect ideas. Let's look at each of those tasks separately, and then we'll look at how you might combine them in useful ways. One way that you can separate ideas is through the use of containers, which is just a general term for some marks that include some ideas to show that they are separate from others. You can use different line styles to do that enclosing of ideas, and note that the style that you give those lines can also be used to convey information. You might recognize some of these as a thought bubble or a speech bubble or some idea that's well protected compared to one that might be more open to change. As we'll see in the next module, you can also use an image as a container, which is another fun way to merge the verbal and the visual. Another, I think, underrated way to separate ideas is simple white space. It's natural to want to fill all of the space available to you, especially when interesting ideas keep coming in. But I recommend that you keep your notes the way you might want to keep your workspace, uncluttered. If you try to cram too many ideas into a given space, then you'll have trouble when you look back on those notes. It will be hard to distinguish between the many ideas there, and you'll likely end up glossing over some of them without really even noticing what's there. Note that you can also use just a simple line as a container as well. It doesn't have to be a closed shape. In this case, think of a wall as opposed to a box. Those are two good physical analogies to help you think about this idea of a container. Going even more minimal than a line, a dot will do just fine as well to separate ideas. That's what's at the core of a bulleted list, a simple set of dots to separate one idea from the next. And just as you can use images as containers, you can also use images as bullets, as we will soon see, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. There are some interesting similarities between the ways that you can separate ideas and the ways that you can connect ideas. Where white space helps you to separate ideas, the lack thereof, or proximity, can demonstrate a connection between ideas. And while you can use containers and simple lines or even dots to separate ideas, you can also use simple lines in a slightly different way to connect two ideas. What was once a wall turns into a tether. You can add a bit more meaning to a line by turning it into an arrow that can help to describe in more detail the relationship between one idea and the next. And just as the style of the lines drawn to contain an idea let us know something about that container, similarly, the style of the arrow you draw can tell us something about the nature of that connection. You can also label any of these lines or arrows, both those connecting and those separating ideas, for yet another layer of meaning. One of the most useful applications of arrows in particular is their ability to show process. With arrows, you can direct the flow of information and convey complex relationships much more succinctly and clearly than if you were using text alone. But when you actually sit down and engage in a visual note-taking session, you won't just be separating ideas or just be connecting them. You will be doing both at the same time. So let's look at how you can do that. I like to use the example of a family tree because it shows a hierarchical structure that could just as easily represent the evolution of an idea as it could the evolution of a species. Notice here that we've got both containers and connectors working together to tell a story. And what I want you to think about is what type of stories are you telling with your notes? And how might you use the techniques mentioned in this video to separate and connect the elements of that story? That's what I want you to think about as a follow-up to this video. Below this video, you will find a set of activities to help you develop your own set of separators and connectors to use in your visual notes. So check out those activities, and I'll see you in the next video.